Hey, welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're kicking around a question that, well, it pops up pretty regularly when we're just chatting, and I know it's something a lot of people think about. This whole idea of free will. Do we really have it?
That's one of those big ones, isn't it? It feels, fundamental to how we see ourselves, the world, and debated for ages.
Exactly. And recently I was checking out this YouTube video. It's from Grandmaster Wolf, an episode called Do We Really Have Free Will with Matt Ricard.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they got into some really interesting angles on it. So for this deep dive, we thought we'd kind of pull apart some of their conversations, see what clicks.
Sounds good.
Our goal really is just to explore their different perspectives and maybe, get a bit clearer ourselves on what free will might actually mean.
Okay. So they jumped right in, I guess, with that core question.
Pretty much. Does free will truly exist, or is everything just sort of playing out, predetermined?
That whole destiny versus choice thing.
Right. And they even wondered if it's maybe more of a spectrum. Like, the difference between consciously deciding, say, what we talk about right now.
Versus just reacting. Like
Yeah.
if there's a loud bang outside.
Yeah.
Unconscious decisions based on conditions. Yeah.
Exactly. And Grandmaster Wolf's initial answer was pretty firm. A yes.
Just straight up yes.
Yep. He believes free will absolutely exists.
Okay.
He even used this analogy, a married couple.
Okay. How does that work?
Well, like, both individuals have their own free will, right?
Yeah.
But for the marriage to be, smooth and happy,
They have to combine their wills, work together sometimes.
exactly, find a way for those wills to cooperate. It sort of highlights that our freedom doesn't exist in a vacuum.
That makes sense. Your choices bump up against other people's choices. So did they break down what has free will?
They did. They talked about two aspects of a human being. You've got matter, the physical stuff, and then spirit, which they said includes the mind and the ego.
Okay, matter and spirit. So different types of free will then.
Yeah, that's where they went. They described this spiritual free will tied to the non-physical part, mind and spirit.
And that one is?
Unlimited, basically. Unlimited freedom to explore itself, explore life. It's a pretty huge idea.
Unlimited. Wow. That suggests a kind of consciousness beyond just the physical brain, maybe.
That's how it felt, yeah. Like, a part of us isn't bound by physical laws in the same way.
But then there's the ego part.
Right. And they said the ego also has free will, but, and this is the key bit, with guidelines, with caps.
Caps, like limits.
Exactly. He used the speed of light as an analogy, a fundamental limit in physics.
Okay, so the ego's free will has some kind of built-in boundary. Why?
Well, his reasoning was because the ego itself can be, and this was his phrasing, ridiculous, quite stupid, quite aggressive, and quite destructive.
Whoa. Okay, so the limits are maybe protective, to stop the ego running totally wild.
Sort of feels that way, yeah.
Yeah.
To keep things from going completely off the rails, maybe for us and for society.
So how does that work then? How do we navigate these caps?
They suggested that if you stay within the framework of being like a civilized, loving, wonderful kind of a person.
Your free will is basically untouched. You can explore it fully.
That seemed to be the idea. But if you veer into negative behavior, his words were being a dickhead and an asshole, then your free will becomes extraordinarily limited.
So your behavior directly impacts the scope of your own freedom.
That's interesting.
Right.
It's like being constructive opens doors, being destructive closes them.
It is a powerful way to frame it.
Yeah.
Then they brought in another layer. Two kinds of truth.
Two truths. Okay.
Relative truth and absolute truth.
All right, let's break that down. Relative truth is.
What's true just for you in your life. Your name, where you're from, your personal history, it's tied to your individual existence.
And it dies with you, essentially.
Exactly. But absolute truth, that's different.
That's the stuff that exists regardless of you.
Yeah. What was here before you were born, what's here while you're alive, what continues after you're gone, it's unchanging.
Like fundamental laws of physics,
Yeah.
maybe? Or just existence itself. Could be. Things that are true whether we perceive them or not. And they argued both of these truths, relative and absolute, have their own way of being and their own free will.
Wow. Okay, so even these different levels of reality might have some kind of agency. That's mind-bending.
It really is. They then tried to tie this back to the spiritual free will and the ego free will.
How do those relate? Are they separate? Connected?
Both, apparently. They described it as codependent and independent, which led them straight into talking about paradox.
Paradox. Always comes up in these kinds of talks. Did they have a take on it?
They did. They had this really punchy line, if there's no paradox, it's not true.
Okay. If there's no paradox, it's not true. What do they mean by that?
Well, they used an example like, the only certainty in life is change.
Right, that old saying, which is itself a paradox. The only constant is inconsistency.
Exactly. So because we're always in this state of flux, this permanent change, that state itself becomes a kind of permanence, a stable instability, if you like.
So how does that connect back to free will? Maybe the freedom is in the constant choosing, the navigating of that change, not some static state of unlimited options.
That feels like what they were getting at. The freedom is in the process, the dynamic act of choosing within whatever reality we're in. They also linked it to how we perceive time.
Time, how so?
Like being in the moment versus the relentless forward flow of events. Another paradox, right? You're static in the now, yet carried forward constantly.
It's a similar principle. Things seem contradictory, but actually describe a deeper reality. They mentioned the yin and yang symbol too, didn't they?
They did, with the dots of the opposite color in each half.
Yeah, showing the seed of the opposite within each thing.
Yeah.
And that S-shaped line in the middle, the path of truth, balancing the opposites.
And it suggested that really meditating on that symbol, holding that paradox,
could lead to a flash of insight, sudden understanding.
yeah. Like the paradox isn't something to solve, but something to comprehend directly.
Okay, deep stuff. So did they connect free will to karma at all? That item comes up.
They did. Someone must have asked about it. Grandmaster Wolf's description of karma was interesting. Less about simple cause and effect, like you do X, so Y happens.
More nuanced.
Yeah, more like a principle of attraction. He said, what you are is what you become.
Okay, what
Yeah.
you are is what you become.
And he used this very vivid analogy about someone constantly focused on sex. He said they might metaphorically become like a rabbit in their karmic journey.
Like your dominant focus shapes your state of being, which attracts similar experiences or qualities.
That seemed to be the gist. It's about the energy you embody attracting, like, energy.
So where's the free will in that?
Yeah.
If you're just attracting based on what you are.
The free will is the ability to change what you are, to stop, to control your actions, shift your focus.
So you can consciously intervene, redirect your energy, and therefore change the attraction, change the outcome.
Exactly. That's the freedom within the karmic process, as they described it. They also made a point about responsibility. Like, if you use the rabbit analogy, if you act a certain way and face immediate direct consequences, that's not necessarily karma with a capital K.
It's just cause and effect on a more mundane level.
Yeah.
Taking responsibility for your choices.
Yeah. You did the thing. This is what happened. Own it. It's distinct from that deeper energetic attraction principle.
That's a useful distinction. Sometimes these terms get bundled together.
Totally. And they actually touched on the evolution of language in these mystical paths.
How the words we use might not quite fit anymore.
Right. Old terms were designed for the world as it was understood then. Language evolves. Think about scientific jargon today. It aims for precision.
Whereas older mystical language can sometimes feel a bit ambiguous, open to interpretation.
Exactly. Which isn't necessarily bad, but it can make clear understanding tricky. It makes you think about whether our concept of free will is also evolving as our language does.
That's a really good point. How we even frame the question changes over time. Do they talk about how we know things, like the nature of knowing itself?
They did. This was another fascinating bit. They distinguished between pure knowing and mind knowing.
Okay. Pure knowing is...
Sort of direct, untainted awareness. Spiritual knowing, like knowing you love someone is just a feeling, a state. You don't need a picture or a concept for it. It just is.
Okay. That immediate intuitive sense. So mind knowing is different.
Mind knowing is what happens when you take that pure knowing and try to process it, turn it into a thought, a picture, put words to it.
And the mind, or the brain, can interfere.
Yeah. They suggested the brain's main job is dealing with material stuff, quantifying things. So when it grabs hold of that pure knowing, it can add opinions, interpretations, twist it, dilute it. It becomes less pure.
So the spirit just knows, but the mind thinks about the knowing, potentially altering it in the process.
That's a good way to put it. Spirit knows, mind thinks. And thinking is more for navigating the physical world.
They mentioned near-death experiences here, right?
Uh-huh.
An example.
Yeah, exactly. How people often report this overwhelming feeling of pure love, pure knowing, but struggle massively to describe it afterwards.
Because our language, our mind-based concepts just can't capture that direct, pure experience.
Right. It sounds like they were suggesting that tapping into that state of pure knowing, maybe that connects us more to that unlimited spiritual free will they talked about earlier.
That's a really neat connection to make. Like, quieting the mind's processing might open up access to that deeper, freer state of being.
It does seem to loop back quite elegantly. So, if you're listening, maybe consider that idea. Does your own mind, your thoughts, sometimes feel like they limit your sense of possibility, your ego free will?
It's something to reflect on for sure.
Okay, so let's try and pull the main threads together here. We started asking if free will is real.
And the conversation we explored from Grandmaster Wolf and Matt Rickard suggested, well, it's complicated, yes, but in layers.
Right. There's this idea of a boundless spiritual free will and then a more constrained ego free will.
And the limits on that ego, well, might even be linked to our own behavior, how constructive or destructive we are.
Then there was the whole concept of paradox being fundamental. If there's no paradox, it's not true.
And how free will fits into karma, not just simple payback, but this idea of attraction. What you are is what you become, and our ability to consciously change that.
Plus, personal responsibility for direct consequences. And finally, that distinction between pure, direct knowing and how our minds process and sometimes distort that knowing.
Yeah, it's definitely not a simple yes-no. They offered some really compelling ways to think about the interplay between our choices, our inner landscape, and, well, reality itself.
Absolutely. It's clearly a deep, ongoing conversation. And, the original creators even invited more questions in their comments, which just shows there's always more to explore.
Definitely. So maybe a final thought for you listening. Considering all these ideas, the different kinds of will, the limits, the paradox, the knowing how might this shift the way you look at your own choices day to day, and the ripples they might create, something to mull over.